hope. That's what our clients want. Hope. Hope that there is healing. Hope that there's justice. Hope that people believe in the good, that this world is a better place. I mean, I know that's what keeps me going.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SASS Podcast. Or if this is your first time joining in, thank you for being with us. This podcast is a safe space for victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault to share their stories and connect with others who've been through similar experiences. I believe that sharing our stories is the first step to healing, and my hope is that the SASS Podcast will help victims and survivors feel less alone and more empowered. I'm your host, Dave Markel, coming to you from the Pod Vlog studio in St. George, Utah, and I'm here each week to provide a platform for victims and survivors to tell their story and for experts and professionals to offer insights and information to help us all on our healing path and to provide an education on being trauma-informed in order to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape or sexual assault. If you are a victim, survivor, or know someone who is, or if you investigate or prosecute rape or sexual assault cases, or if you provide treatment, counseling, or interact with victims or survivors of rape or sexual assault in any capacity, I urge you to listen to this podcast. Remember, you are not alone, and we are all here to support you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me for episode 44 of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SASS Podcast. This week's guest is one that I'm very excited to introduce to you, Jessica Pride of the Pride Law Firm. She's a civil litigation attorney whose sole clientele are victims and survivors of rape or sexual assault. I happened to run across a reel that she had produced on Instagram and immediately realized that I wanted Jessica to be a guest on this show, not only because she fights for justice for victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault, but also because she starts by believing and she's trauma-informed. That was the winning combination that motivated me to invite her to be a guest on this show. Jessica was gracious enough to say yes. Get ready, because in this episode, we're diving headfirst into her world of strength, resilience, and determination. Jessica Pride is more than an attorney. She's a beacon of hope, a warrior for change, and a true advocate for those whose voices have been stifled. She's a force to be reckoned with in the pursuit of justice, and she truly embodies strength, compassion, and unwavering dedication. Her journey, insights, and her unbreakable spirit are about to take center stage, and by the end of this episode, you'll be uplifted and educated. Here's Jessica. Jessica Pride, welcome to the Sexual Assault Survivor Stories podcast. It is an honor and a pleasure to have you as part of this show.
Thank you, Dave. I'm honored to be here. You are doing such an amazing job with this podcast and providing a platform for survivors to tell their stories. I couldn't be more pleased to be here and to help you on your journey to help end sexual violence.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. I've been communicating with you on and off for several weeks now about getting this done. So it's just a pleasure and honor to finally have you on this show and have an episode that features you and what you're doing to help victims and survivors. I really do want to get into that. Before we do get into your work and what you do with the Pride Law Firm, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, some background, and how you got involved with law in general, and then specifically the Pride Law Firm?
Well, I think if you ask my mother why I'm a lawyer, she'd probably tell you because I was a precocious child who liked to argue. And I remember at an early age, her always telling me, you're going to be a great lawyer someday, which reminds me of my daughter who she got in trouble. And I said, you are not allowed to play with your iPad anymore. You're on timeout right now for the rest of the day. And then I walk downstairs and I see her on her brother's iPad. And I said, excuse you? I said, you're not allowed to be on the iPad. And she said, Mommy, you said I couldn't play on my iPad. You didn't say all iPads. So I had that moment, right, where my mom probably thought about me, this kid's going to be a lawyer. So now when I have to punish her, I have to say all devices, any and all devices are off limits because my child will find a way around it. So I was the same kind of kid. When I wasn't arguing with my mother, I was standing up to bullies. I really don't like bullies, and I don't like people picking on vulnerable people. One of my best friends in high school, and I think I had to be 16 at the time. And mind you, I'm 5'2" and pretty petite. Back then, I was 98 pounds. This group of girls came down the hallway during passing period, and I'm half Mexican, half Swiss, and my girlfriend was Mexican. They grabbed her, threw her into the locker. I got pissed. And so I ended up trying to fight them. And they looked at me because I was like a little chihuahua, compared to these very large girls and a whole group of them. And they were like, this girl has lost her mind. And I was just like, you know what? That is not okay. And you're not going to talk to my friend like that. You're not going to push her. And if you want to push somebody, come push me. That fighting spirit has stuck with me my entire life and has actually served me very well in this line of work. Fast forward, I went to law school. Turns out my mom was right. I did want to be a lawyer and wanted to argue with people on behalf of my clients. I got my first case, which was a sexual assault case. It moved me and it didn't feel like work. And it's that dream that everyone talks about, right? Pick a job that actually doesn't feel like work. And let's not get it wrong. There's some nights where I'm pulling an all-nighter. I'm like, okay, this feels like work. But you have that passion, like you're excited for the fight and you're like, I can't lose. I can't let this person down. And so I'm actually still friends with that client. It was my first client ever. And I thought I want to do more of this. And actually my first initial thought was I want to litigate these cases because I thought it was a unicorn case. And back then there weren't many civil cases on behalf of rape victims. So I went to my local rape crisis center to volunteer. I wanted to be a SART advocate. I thought, let me help the community in that way, because I'd always been a big brother, big sister, or I'd done Make-A-Wish. I've always been really philanthropic with my time. So I went to the Center for Community Solutions, which is our local rape crisis center here in San Diego. And I signed up to do the CIT training, the 60-something hour, and on nights and weekends after work, I did that. And when I completed the program, I said, all right, sign me up. I'm ready to, answer calls on the weekends in the middle of the night. And they said, actually, Jess, could you help us out with civil cases? The grants won't cover, they can't do civil work or cases where, and there's any type of profit. Do you think that you and your firm could take on some of these cases and help out these survivors? And I was like, well, 100%. One case turned into two, which turned into three. Ultimately decided to leave the firm I was at and started my own firm, or joined up here. My husband, actually, I should say, he is an attorney, a team of one back then. I quit my job. I was, I think, 6.5, 7 months pregnant. It was huge. Had one of those days. It was very emotional. I thought, I don't want to do dog bite cases. I don't want to do car crashes anymore. It doesn't float my boat. I'm not passionate about it. All I want to do is sexual assault cases. And so I quit. And I came home, and Mandy, I had just gotten like this big raise. I had a great job. I worked for a great firm. Like, I had such a good gig. And I went home huge and pregnant, and I made the face where, when you're in trouble and you walk through the door, like, oh, I did something, you're going to be mad at me. I sat on the couch and I was like, I have something to tell you. And he was like, what? I said, I quit and I'm going to do sexual assault litigation all the time. He was like, you have lost your mind. He was like, you don't know if it's going to work. How are we going to support our family? I had the health insurance. I mean, everything was kind of riding on what I was doing. And I said, look, I feel really strongly about it. I feel passionate about this is the type of law I'm going to do. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if we'll be able to pay our bills, but I know this is what I need to do because it was in line with who I am. And I know we've talked offline a little bit about I'm a survivor, and so many people really close to me are survivors. And I felt like this is my life's mission. If I can take my legal skills and use that to be a voice and a way for survivors to get justice, then that's what I need to do with my life. Like, what else would I do? So thankfully, now looking back a little over 10 years ago, turns out I made a good decision. Yeah. It all worked out all right. I'm super proud of me and the work we've done.
Absolutely. And So am I proud of you. I'm proud to know you. I'm proud to be acquainted with somebody who absolutely gets this and has dedicated your education and your work and your sweat to help victims and survivors. Thank you.
Thank you. You're so sweet. If I ever feel down or having a rough week, I'm just going to come on your show.
Just call Dave Markel.
That's so lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
You just text me and say, hey, Dave, do you have a minute to talk? And we will talk. I'm always there for my guests.
Defense counsel was so mean to me today. Remind me again.
Yeah, exactly. In line with that, if you could tell our audience about your trauma-informed journey, how you found out what it means to be trauma-informed and where you got your trauma-informed education and background.
That's a really good question. I learned how to be a lawyer at two of the largest law firms in California. I had a great education on how to litigate a case, what it meant to do X, Y, or Z. There's something about being a civil litigator, though. When you're a trial lawyer, our jobs, they teach us, to read people and audiences and that's how when you're doing voir dire, we are known as more of the personable type of lawyers. We're not patent lawyers hiding behind our desks. We are heady, but we tend to be more people. However, what I found about the practice of law is that really it wasn't very personal and it wasn't trauma informed. And so when I decided to come to the private law firm and to grow our practice here and practice only sexual assault litigation, I thought, I'm going to do it my way. Who says it has to be the way it was before? You meet with the client, you go through the basic interview process, you get information, and then you check in with them every once in a while. I didn't think that was conducive to what a survivor goes through. So early on, we kind of looked at the way a civil litigation case happens and said, how can we support a survivor so that they can make it through the process? Because when you have a client that's in trauma, and especially if they're in acute trauma, they're not giving you good answers. And you can't ask a survivor who was in immediate trauma, right? We know so much about the neurobiology of trauma that when a survivor is being sexually assaulted, their brain's not recording memories the way it would if you were, let's say, walking down the street and witnessed some kind of incident. I couldn't bring a client into my office and say, all right, start at the beginning and tell me exactly what happened, because I wasn't going to get good information. I always try to start with the question more like, what can't you forget? And try and tie it to sensory experiences to try and elicit those types of ways of finding out their story. But before you ever get to that place, I really believe do no harm.
Absolutely.
If my client's in acute trauma and they're worried about safety right now, or they're having out-of-body experiences because their anxiety and stress is so high, let's help stabilize them first. Let's ask them key questions before we start questioning. Let's make sure that they're on their hierarchy of needs, that there are key elements of safety and they're able to figure, they have a place to stay. They're not living in the apartment next to their predator or things like that. Let me help stabilize them first. And then through the process, realize they have a support system. They have a support system either through our in-house, we call her a survivor advocate, other people call them victim advocates. And then we do everything from self-care kits to monthly check-ins to giving choices. I feel very strongly that in this process, if you want to be trauma-informed, you have to give a survivor choices. Absolutely. And sometimes those are little choices, like where do you want to meet? Our first meeting, you want to meet on Zoom? In your house where you feel safe? Do you want to go to a public place and meet at a Starbucks? Do you want to come to my office? Where do you want to go? And along the way, keeping them informed about the process and giving them the right to choose. Do you want to go forward? Do you want to do this? And that's because we know in trauma, survivor didn't get the choice. They didn't get the choice to be assaulted. Nobody picks that choice. In order to help empower our clients, to get them from that pathway of victim to survivor, let's let them make their own choices. Let's give them that feeling that they are taking back their power and they are doing what they need to do to feel like they're getting justice. We changed the way we practice law here at the Pride Law Firm to model it in a trauma-informed way. I have found that it is really conducive and supportive, and my clients really love it. And believe me, we tweak it along the way. Every person's different. Some of my clients want to get updates all the time about everything because it's part of their control that makes them feel safe Where I have other clients that are like, don't bother me, only call me if you need me, because every time I have to hear about this, it triggers me. Having a recording system in everybody's case file that says these are what their triggers are. This is what their past trauma looks like, because most of our clients are prior survivors, whether it's child sex abuse, things like that. So we know where the kind of sensitive areas are. So we make sure we go back to the whole thing, do no harm. Yeah. I'm here to fight for my clients in a way that best serves them and is what in their best interest. There have been cases where I thought, God, let's go all the way. We're going to fight this. I know I could do so well. And if I see a client just not doing well through the process, you have to remember it's not about me. It's not what I want. It's what's in their best interest. I am here to serve them. And I sell the cases out for less than what I thought they were worth, but that was what was in the client's best interest. So I will always do what is in my client's interest. And actually on my wall, I have my pillars of what I stand for written there: justice, healing, ending sexual violence. If whatever I'm doing, make a decision. I don't know, we're going to do this new marketing campaign, or do I want to take this case? Or, if it doesn't fit within those pillars, I'm not doing it. I think that's how you compromise yourself. I want to stay true to our mission. I want to stay true to what I stand for and do the best job I can.
Whenever I talk to someone who uses the term trauma-informed in their marketing or in their social media posts, my interest is piqued, but I never know until I start talking to that person whether or not they are what, in my opinion, is truly informed as far as trauma-informed. You're saying to me all of the things that just fit in what I've been trying to tell my victims and survivor audience, but also my audience that's in law enforcement and prosecution and victim advocacy. And that is the true elements of being trauma-informed start with, as you've already emphasized twice, is first, do no further harm. And then the second approach that just is so critical, and obviously you've grasped this and are doing this, is the empathic approach. And it involves knowing what is best for the person that you're communicating with, whether you're interviewing them or just having a conversation with them. Knowing what trauma is and does to people changes the way you interact with that person. And it's just fulfilling to me to hear you talk the way you're talking. And the other part of this is the neuroscience of trauma. So many people gloss right over the neuroscience. And if you're going to truly be trauma-informed, you have to know the neuroscience of trauma and what the brain goes through in trauma. And you have a grasp of that. Tell me more about gaining that knowledge, the neuroscience base.
I picked things up along the way of talking to experts. I did a training that you actually, I didn't know that you were involved in it, having done FETI a long time ago, going to sexual assault conferences, just reading, The Body Keeps Score and all these different things. But if that wasn't enough, I decided to go back to school to get a certificate in trauma studies. So I'm currently enrolled at Cambridge College, getting my certificate there in trauma studies. And so I just finished taking a class all about the neurobiology of trauma. And I learn something new every time.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see how trauma affects the brain. I just wish, God, I would love if we could just do a brain scan and say, hey, look, see what you did to this person's brain. Yeah. This shows exactly how much you traumatized them. But the problem is most people don't have a prior brain scan that we can compare the new brain scan to. And I think that the research isn't exactly there yet. The beautiful part about the research that I find so fascinating is the neuroplasticity of the brain, the brain's ability to heal itself. People who sustain severe trauma and they have that immediate neurological response, it's the trigger. It's when you were in trauma, your brain stored that response and went, okay, anytime you feel this kind of trauma, you're going to have a panic attack or go outside your body or do whatever it is. But you can fix it. You can actually fix it through mindfulness. And, there's so many different techniques out there right now. They're talking a lot about the, microdosing mushrooms and the ability of ketamine and different ways to fix trauma. I understand that pharmaceutical drugs can be helpful. And the research I was reading was saying that, look, things like Zoloft and different anxiety medications. They help you when you're in acute trauma, and then you kind of like baseline out. But the way to change the brain response is through mindfulness, whether that's EMDR, psychotherapy, or different types of meditation, anything like that. I'm really fascinated with that piece right now. I do think justice is one way to help a survivor get justice, but I'm really looking at the healing piece, because I think justice is one form of healing for a survivor, but healing looks so different for everyone. Mm-hmm. And so how can I help a survivor also get to a place of peace? You're never going to forget, but can you be okay with it and look back at it and go, that was just a memory, but look at what I have done with it. It didn't break me. And I look at myself, for example, and I say, look, I could have done a lot of things. I could have given up. I could have done a whole bunch of things, but I'm here fighting. I'm here a voice for survivors. I'm making a difference. I'm trying to help other people. I'm trying to be that person that I didn't have when I was in a different place. And so how can I empower others? How can I turn my trauma into triumph? I really try to do that, trauma to triumph. I think I told you, I'm opening up a healing center for survivors, as if I didn't have enough on my plate with running a law firm and going to school. And I'm also on the board. I was on the board for a sexual assault organization for the last 7 years. But I thought, how else can I help? Well, let's open a healing center with my free time.
Wow, I am so excited for that. That is so needed.
And it's only going to be for survivors of sexual assault. Well, that's the root cause of your trauma, because we know trauma manifests, right? It manifests in eating disorders, depression, anxiety, cutting, whatever it is. You go Betty Ford, for example, and you go there, you're drinking, your alcohol addiction, but everybody there is for different reasons. Yeah. Maybe all the treaters aren't trauma informed. They're not all coming from the same place. So this will be a safe place for survivors. And I want it to be the #1 trauma center in the world. And we're trying to work with, I won't say what school, but we're trying to work with school to try and be a research center, a testing site for cutting edge trauma treatment. It's proven to be quite a beast. I think in this one, I might have bit off a little more. I didn't realize opening a medical facility was way harder than running a law firm. I am so outside of my zone of comfort. But I have a lot of amazing humans that have just honestly said, how can I help you? I want to help you do this. I agree, this is so needed. And so this village of amazing humans are helping me bring it to light. It's taken a lot longer than I expected, but I'm not giving up. It'll be open, knock on wood, hopefully next year. That's, fingers crossed, because we're waiting on, apparently getting a major use permit is no small feat here in San Diego. You will be one of the first people to know. I will definitely invite you to our grand opening to come check it out.
Well, you mentioned being a lifelong learner. Now you're opening a medical facility, and that's a huge learning process, I'm sure. So, wow. Congratulations. And not only congratulations, but thank you for doing that. Like we just said, it is so needed. And I'm wishing and hoping for nothing but the best of all of those efforts for you and for those who are going to benefit from that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
You mentioned being surrounded by people who are like-minded and want the best for victims and survivors. Can you talk about your staff and what your requirements are for them?
First, I want to say I have the most amazing staff, and it takes a team, and I could not help as many people as we do without their support and their blood, sweat, and tears. I have a really passionate team. We are small but mighty. We are a team of 10. And if you knew how many cases we take on and how many huge corporations and famous people and politicians and you name it who try to threaten us, and this team does not back down. They've not backed down. They're equally as passionate. They burn the midnight oil, making sure that justice is served. I would say the first thing I always look for when interviewing somebody is passion. Do you care about this cause? I would say they're all here for a reason, because they care about the work that we do. And I've been so blessed. I really believe in the laws of, attraction, kind of what you put out, you get back. And a lot of the people who work for me, the majority of them, they found me or, have been throughout my life and have come to me and said, hi, I really want to work for you. Are you hiring? Sometimes I'm not even hiring, but I'm like, well, this person's amazing, so I need to figure it out. We need to make a space for them. So I've been really blessed to have found, I'd say 90% of the people who work for me came to me. The other 10%, we put an ad out through the interview process, found the right fit, and we are so blessed to have those people. So once we bring them on, great, everybody needs to be trauma informed. What does that mean? So a lot of people come to us have already had experience working for rape crisis centers or social services or some type of organization that deals with survivors. And so they've already had some type of trauma training. If they haven't, then we provide the trauma training in-house, or we will send them out to our local rape crisis center or online to do, some type of training. We also have an annual retreat that then we provide some type of training. And then I'm really trying to do quarterly trainings where we learn about de-escalation techniques or, how to check in on if a survivor is suicidal, what do we do? So just always trying to make sure that everyone here understands our clients and what they go through. And then I really kind of tailor who talks to our clients. The majority of the communication goes through our survivor advocate. Her and I are the most trained in the office as far as trauma training goes. So I know that every time a new client calls or a potential client or any current client calls, they will always go through Bianca, who I have all the confidence in the world to assess what's going on, talk to someone in a way that they feel comfortable and safe, because she's a voice for all of us. I feel strongly that everyone's trauma trained. If not, maybe not the firm for them, if that's it. And we've had some amazing people who used to work here, that just came through and thought either that sounded like a good idea, and then they were like, maybe not my jam. Totally respected. I get that. And I've had other people who've come through who are also fantastic, who were prior survivors themselves, thought they could do it, and then it was too triggering. And I don't want to do any harm to my clients, I don't want to do any harm to my staff. So because of that, I really stress self-care, self-care, self-care. And, I'll pay for counseling if they need PTO days. I offer a very nice PTO package here at the firm because I appreciate and I realize that people need time, you need time to decompress and to process out the trauma because we live it every day.
Yeah.
If you don't take care of yourself, you can't pour from an empty cup.
I'm so glad you brought that up because most people don't realize that vicarious trauma is cumulative. And if you don't take care of it, it'll just continue to pile on layer upon layer.
If I want my clients to have the best representation possible, I have to take care of the team that takes care of them. Sometimes it means myself too. I've taken more time off in the last couple of years than I have in my entire career. But it was really needed because I caught myself tearing up while I was, and not that I'm not supposed to have emotion to my clients' stories. That's not what I'm saying. It's just sometimes I feel it too much. And then it starts to cause me anxiety. I've got this case and I had to look at some child porn and even some of the images, you just don't get them out of your head. And I have a regular standing appointment, even when I feel like there's nothing wrong. I go to therapy all the time. I work out. I do, sound healing. I do yoga, you name it. Because when I find out when I don't do those things or I don't give myself a break, you feel those things. You have to know the markers. I think appreciating in yourself, same thing like triggers, right? We tell our clients, can you identify your triggers? And then when you do, let's work ways to process them. The same thing happens with us, right? Yeah. You start to notice your capacity is getting full and you're like, okay, can't take any more trauma right now. I need to take a break. And I don't think there's anything selfish in that process. I think it's really needed. I think it's important that we do that for ourselves. And I think it's important that if you're in this type of work, you not only need to practice self-care, but you need to be trauma informed. After the Me Too movement, all these lawyers started going, oh, me too, I want to do this kind of law. Look at the Epstein case and Weinstein. These lawyers are making tons of money. And then all of a sudden it was like being Me Too lawyer was like the hottest fad that ever lived. Because I can tell you before Me Too, nobody wanted these cases. Nobody. And then people used to ask me all the time, how do you get money? How do you get paid on these cases, Jessica? Because insurance companies aren't going to pay for it. And, this or that. And so everybody used to send me their cases. Here, in San Diego, it was like, oh, sexual assault, call Jessica. But then when they realized that it could actually be profitable, they came out of the woodwork. It was like every personal injury lawyer under the sun is now a Me Too lawyer. And I was concerned that they weren't going to do it the right way. I strongly believe that there is enough business out there for everyone. There's no reason to fight over cases. And I'm so thankful that there are so many lawyers that want to help survivors around the country. I just want them to do it in a way that does no harm. I run the sexual assault litigation group through our National Trial Lawyers Association to train lawyers across the country how to be trauma informed and how to do these in a way that serves their clients. Now I can tell you we're the fastest growing litigation group. Now I have hundreds of members that are part of our group. I do think there are a lot of good lawyers out there who care. Anyone who is listening to this who might be thinking, maybe I need a lawyer. First of all, the lawyer needs to give you a free consultation and it's confidential. Make sure they're trauma informed, and that they feel safe and that they feel protected and like they're not being victimized or they're not, their lawyer's not asking them questions like, why did you drink so much? That's a terrible question. Yeah. Your lawyer should never ask you that question. That means that they're not trauma informed. They're not thinking about how that affects you. Because I'm sure you and I both know, Dave, and we train people that how you react to a survivor, especially if you're one of the first people they talk to about their trauma, how you treat them shapes the trajectory of what they do with that.
For the rest of their life, how you respond initially changes everything for them. It either helps them heal or keeps them from healing. There's research out there that says that it affects their future financial income. It affects their relationships, their personal viewpoints. So yes, you're spot on with that.
If your lawyer doesn't believe you, you've got the wrong lawyer.
Absolutely. Explain what it means to be contingency-based, but also not have to pay for those fees and costs along the way.
Right. So it's really, you don't pay unless you win. The costs are fronted. We only spend what we need to win the litigation. Let's say in the small chance and I lose and I'm allergic to losing, then that would be my loss. I'll eat the cost on behalf of the survivor so that is not money that they are out.
That's the amazing part to me. That and the fact that those fees and costs are fronted until you win.
There's a number of plaintiff attorneys that do it. It just depends on the type of case. Sometimes people ask for a retainer, but we don't. As a general rule, we never ask for any money from a survivor up front, which is why we also look in our cases really well. We want to make sure if I'm taking a case on, it's because I believe I can win it. I would love to help everyone. Honestly, I'm the person that would take in 12 stray dogs, and my husband, we already have 3. I'm trying to get another one, and my husband's like, stop, no more dogs. And I'm like, okay, well, how about baby goats? Like, come on, let's take in this pig. And I'd have a whole farm if my neighborhood let us have farms, but I can't take every case, right? Some cases, the defendants don't have any assets, and my job is to get a survivor in civil court to get them money for pain and suffering, for medical bills, for lost wages, things like that. And I can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. There's a bunch of different reasons why we can't take cases. It's quite unfortunate because, we get calls all the time, and that part always hurt my soul, having to tell a survivor that, I couldn't help them. Doesn't mean I don't believe them. It just means that from my standpoint, from what I can offer, there's nothing I can do at this time, which is hard. Which is why another reason I got into this was because in criminal court, the rate of prosecution across the country is 2 to 5%. Can you imagine? If survivors know only 2 to 5% of predators actually get to go sit behind bars and pay for their crimes, how many survivors are out there feeling like they didn't get any justice, that no one heard them? They went to the cops and they didn't do what you thought they were going to do. And I want to say, I don't want to give prosecutors a bad rap and detectives, because I think sex crime detectives does a really hard job. Working on these cases over and over and over again to have not most of them end up in prosecutions or DAs. I'm sure they'd love to prosecute more than they can, but they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime occurred. That's a really high burden. And we know most sex crimes happen behind closed doors. There's no videos. It's hard to prove. Where in civil court, we're more likely than not 50 and a feather. So our chances of winning and getting justice are so much higher, which was why civil court is a great option for survivors as an alternative.
Jessica, I could talk to you all day. I'm thinking that we should have you back for another episode.
Whatever I can do to help to keep people informed, I'm here for all of it. I'm going to keep doing this until I don't have a job anymore. But I don't see an end in sight anywhere. I think we're making some progress.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think the day will ever come that you or I are out of work.
One of my friends said to me the other day, she goes, Jessica, don't you ever get tired? Maybe you won't really make a big difference. And I was like, well, that's a really glum way to look at it. But I said, what are you going to do? You throw the baby out with the bathwater? Just because the system's not perfect. If I can change one life or two lives, it's a rippling effect. We know that generational trauma is real. And so if I made a difference to them, maybe that's all the difference in the world that they need to then help someone else. Maybe we don't end sexual violence completely in our lifetimes, but I'd sure the hell like to know that I died trying to make as big of a dent as possible.
Well, I'm a strong believer that, yes, as you just mentioned, there's generational trauma, there's generational abuse, but there can be generational healing. Maybe we cannot end it all, but we can certainly impact the prevalence. I think that's both of our goals.
Hope. That's what our clients want. Hope. Hope that there is healing. Hope that there's justice. Hope that people believe in the good, that this world is a better place. I mean, I know that's what keeps me going. And meeting people like you or the clients I deal with all the time, I mean, they give me so much strength and hope that there are so many good people in this world and people worth fighting for, and things worth fighting for as well. I am blessed.
You're spot on with all of that. It's been an honor to be able to talk to you, and it would be an honor to know that I have access to you being a guest on this show again.
Always. I would be thrilled.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SASS Podcast. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to Jessica Pride for taking the time to be with us and for her willingness to share with us the power of her voice, her work, and her unwavering dedication to bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. Jessica's commitment goes far beyond the confines of a courtroom. It reaches the hearts of victims and survivors who've been waiting for someone to stand up for them. She's not just an attorney. She's a warrior who champions change with every fiber of her being. Thank you again, Jessica. I also want to thank you, my SASS listeners, for tuning into this week's episode. I would truly appreciate it if you would write a review for this episode and then rate and subscribe to this podcast. Even if you don't listen to every episode, your rating and subscription help this podcast to grow. Also, if you're a victim or survivor of rape or sexual assault and feel that you are ready to tell your story on this podcast in order to help others and to further your own healing journey, please email me at davemarkel@gmail.com. That's DAVEMARKEL@gmail.com. And we'll talk about the possibility of you being on this show. Thank you again for tuning into Sexual Assault Survivor Stories. Just your presence here is helping bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. And don't forget that another great way to do this is to start by believing, because we all know someone whose life has been affected by rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.